Imagine your life story was given a title. What would that title be? Your life summed up in an easy to search online phrase. Crimes, serious crimes, have for years gone by famous titles, names which make them recognisable to all of us. The Moors murders, the toy box killer, the staircase, the honeymoon couple. But what if your life story, your headline, was summed up in one of the following 3 phrases? The house of blood, the mother of all evil, the deathly dame. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Right, a quick couple of updates, some shout outs, and then on with the story. So firstly, Thick Bush Gate has grown strong. It's got its own campaign going on at the moment. Lots of reaction to my complete immaturity in the last episode at not being able to stop laughing at Thick Bush. So thank you if you were one of the people who got in touch about it. Yeah. I need to thank those who are at the moment taking the time to review the podcast, support the podcast, and there's lots of people on Twitter, there's lots of people on Instagram who are sharing the podcast far and wide, and I thank you for that. And people helping with podcast reviews on iTunes. It's doing wonders for the growth of the show, so thank you. Alright, shout outs, and then we'll get on. Shout out, first of all, goes to Jessica Cole. Jessica, your Patreon support is so important to me. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, Nicole and Joseph. Nicole and husband Joseph, they emailed me because they listen to the podcast. So, hello, the both of you. I hope that you are well. I love a couple that listen to the podcast. I always think it must be weird if you're a couple that listen to the podcast, because you're going to have different opinions, aren't you? You're going to feel differently about certain stories, about certain things. But yeah, that you both listen is lovely. So, hello and thank you for listening. Edwina Fox Bibelbrox and husband Nick. We've got another husband and wife. Hello to you both. Hello, Edwina and Nick. Yes, lovely to have you listening. Nick, I believe you work on the rigs. And yes, when you are offshore, you listen to the podcast. So thank you, and thanks, Edwina, for the email. And finally, David Crofton, who is a member of the Facebook group. And David... So, a message popped up I thought was going to be really nice, and it was based on last week when I did the little outtakes in the end credits, and it started by saying, "Oh, I think you should do outtakes at the end of every episode. Who knows what surprises we'll get? Perhaps you singing in tune." Cheeky bastard, David. Cheeky bastard. David, haters gonna hate. Jealousy is an ugly thing. And I mean, I know, David, that what you're really angling for is you want a recording of my voice for me to send to you, and you're not going to get it because this singing voice, it's precious. Okay? So, okay, that's the shout outs. Let's get on with the story. Okay, I'm warning you now. It's brutal. It's bloody. It's a messy situation. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Alright, let's start with the star of the show. Edith. Edith McClendon. Edith was born in Glasgow, Scotland, in 1968. Edith will grow up to later be described as the mother of all evil. Let's see how Edith got there. Right, so Edith's life growing up and living in Glasgow, it's less than desirable for anyone. She begins to run into trouble at a very young age. She spends a massive part of her teenage life in trouble with police for various different crimes, stealing, getting into fights, alcohol abuse, and she spends a massive part of her later teenage years and then adult life in and out of prison and constantly in trouble with the law. Edith's one of these people who, sad to say, it's a terrible fucking place to be, but if you looked up Edith's police record, it would probably go back to when she was 12 years old, right through to adult life, and there would be a list as long as your arm with run-ins with the police and problems that she's run into. She has always had issues with the police or the police, as a Glaswegian would call them. In Glasgow, the police tend to go by the police. You'll often hear, "Quick, run! The police are coming!" Edith was said to be a neglected child, and she had developed problems with drugs by the age of 15. Fuck me, that's just... Yeah, so by the age of 15, she had problems with drugs and alcohol at that point. Now, at age 19, she fell pregnant, and she gave birth to a boy who she called John. So, by my calculations, and I'm no mathematician, I really am not a mathematician, but I think that would have been 1987. She gave birth to her baby boy, John. Yeah, I think from working from when she was born, etc. So 1987, she gives birth to her child. Okay, so as we go on in the story, you've got Edith, and what's going to happen is there's about to be a series of male characters who appear in the story. So I just want us all to keep track of who these men are that are appearing in the story. It's quite the range of male members. Oh, pardon the pun. It's quite, yeah, there's a lot of male members going on in this story. But we'll remember first of all that John is her son. So, Edith's love life, which, well, to be fair, it's maybe the least of Edith's issues. She's just trying to survive. Edith, that's really her focus in life, is just to try and survive. But along the way, she has some relationships. She has boyfriends here, there, short term, long term. There's a whole mix. She kind of moves from boyfriend to boyfriend, and she gets herself into things and out of things. Ultimately, she brings up her baby on her own, And now her family, she's not very connected to her family, but when they need to, a relative like an aunt or a cousin will step in and will try and help her with the baby. Because when John is a baby, she's in and out of prison for theft and prostitution. What it kind of all adds up to is that Edith's son John spends a lot of time in and out of different foster homes growing up. Because Edith she just couldn't cope with being a mother. And that's part of her addictions to alcohol, her problems with drugs. So there was times when he was taken away and put into a foster home, and then she would get out of prison, reset her life, start again. She would get her son back, and problems would arise again. And before you know it, John would be whisked off to another foster home or taken into care. So we skip forward to her son John being 17 years old, and he's a young man cutting about Glasgow, doing his thing, meeting his pals, going out. Now, although he had been in and out of care and Edith had her own problems to deal with, they'd actually always maintained quite a strong mother-son relationship, which I think's great. I think that's great that even though he was in different foster homes, they still managed to have a relationship. He really loved his mum and she really loved John, but they were both aware of Edith's failings in being able to cope with the fact that she had a son. John had, and this is, I'm not being, and I don't mean this in any way whatsoever to sound judgmental, because I'm not a judgmental person, and I don't mean this to sound, I just don't mean it to sound bad in any way whatsoever, but with the kind of unstructured and slightly fractured life that John had, he had had a couple of run-ins with the police as well. Now, they weren't anything major, they weren't anything huge, but I kind of get that. I think he's 17 and he's bounced about from home to home. Sometimes he's with his mum, sometimes he's not. That's an unstable life. And so I'm not judging anybody in this situation. I'm just saying that's the way that it was. So Edith, back to Edith. Now Edith, if you see images of her, and I recommend that you look Edith up at the end of the story, she has the kind of face that says, you've lived a life and it's not necessarily always been kind to you. Do you know what I mean? That sort of, when you look at someone and you go, you've got a story, there's something there, you've definitely been through stuff before. I find Edith actually quite scary looking. She's got incredibly piercing eyes. Very, very piercing eyes. So we're going to go to the day where this whole story is going to come to a head, and we're going to really see Edith for who she is. So the day in question, it's a Saturday, it's 2004, and Edith is not long out of a short time in prison. She'd spent a short time in prison for assault. She'd been in for 9 months. And here she was released. This was her day of freedom. She had done her time. And Edith makes her way to the south side of Glasgow. My old home, the south side of Glasgow. 18 years of my life, I lived there. I lived in the Shawlands area, which is quite a nice little bit of it. But the south side, the south side of Glasgow, it's still kind of suffering from it, but it did have massive poverty issues, a lot of drug issues, a lot of alcoholism. And for a long time, a long time, and it still kind of happens. There was a lot of immigration issues around the south side. A lot of people who are coming in to Scotland, who are coming into Glasgow, who had been fleeing from other countries. For some reason, Glasgow City Council housed them all in the south side, and it created this sort of racial tension, which was not the fault of the people who were just arriving here seeking help or seeking a home, but it created this kind of racial tension running through the whole south side, and at this point, 2004, this was a particular problem. Now, it's not that actually has really anything to do with the story, but I'm just trying to give you a picture of the area. The area is actually, there's lots of lovely bits in it. There's all these old, beautiful Glasgow tenement flats that are massive. They have the biggest, highest, most ornate ceilings ever. They're just absolutely beautiful. But actually, the area feels like there's poverty, there's problems, and you can feel the tension in the area. It's getting better. It's getting better in the south side. So, Edith is in the south side because she is going to visit her boyfriend, David Gillespie. So David is the second male that we need to know in Edith's story. Edith and David, they had met a few years ago. They were a bit on and off. Sometimes they would end up being in the same pub. They would get together, they'd spend a couple of weeks together, go their own separate ways. But just before Edith had gone into prison for this assault charge and spent 9 months, they decided that they wanted to be a couple. However, she'd been behind bars for that length of time, and so now, here she is, she's out, she's free. And she wants to reconnect with her boyfriend, David. Before I go any further with the story, I'll not keep interjecting with random nonsense, but I have to tell you right about this thing that I watched when I was looking at the story. So I found this magical source online, and like a good magician, I won't reveal my secrets. But basically, it's a place where you can see absolutely massive stories, but you can see them in like a little bite-size form. So they're like little short videos, and they tell you about the crime. They don't really tell you everything about the story, but they tell you enough about the crime. And it really helps me to go, am I really interested in this story or not? Maybe yes, maybe no. Or like sometimes I'll think, do you know what? That sounds to me like a brilliant story I could tell. And then I watch the wee bite-sized video and I go, actually, do you know what? It doesn't really sit well with me politically or socially. And, it's just useful for me. So when I looked, when I looked at this particular source, I wanted to just get an overview of this story. And oh my God, it was brilliant. It was so brilliant, right? These wee bite-sized films, they're produced by an American company, and they star American actors. Now, obviously, this is a Glaswegian story. Now, this is in no way, do not take this in the wrong way. This is not an attack on you, America. Please understand that. It turns out, actually, over half of the listeners to this podcast are in America. And I would be devastated if I lost you in one big massive swoop because I offended you. So please don't be offended by this. But this little film, it starts up and it's like proper Hollywood setup. It's like, what's the best word to describe it? Like, it's like shiny, right? It's like glamorous. Now, you've just listened to me describe what the south side of Glasgow looked like at that time. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't glamorous, right? So it starts like this. It was a dark and stormy night in Glasgow, Scotland. Forgive me, I'm not taking the piss. I'm not taking the piss. I mean, this is coming from the man who thought that Arkansas was pronounced Arkansas. So I'm really not one to talk here. Anyway, it's like, it was a dark and a stormy night in Glasgow, Scotland, when Edith McAlinden made her way to her boyfriend David's apartment in the south side of the city. Right, so at this point, the actress playing Edith comes on the screen, and I nearly pissed my pants laughing because she's fucking like a model. She's gorgeous, right? She's like really pretty. She's like really well presented. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, what's going on here, right? Now, like I said, when I'm done, look up Edith, and I'm not being mean. I'm just being realistic. This is not a realistic representation of Edith. So this carries on, right, with the voiceover. Edith had just left jail, and on that night there was going to be trouble. And then, this is the best bit, right? It cuts to a Glaswegian police officer, an actual officer who ends up involved in this case. And it goes from, there was going to be trouble, to him going, if evil ever visited Glasgow, it visited Glasgow that night in that flat. He is the most Glaswegian man in the world, and it kind of like smacks you in the face because you're like, what? You're partly watching Hollywood blockbuster, but you're like, your brain's just going, oh, what the hell is going on here? So yeah. So anyway, I don't know why I'm telling you that, but that was just the random thing that I came across when I was researching, and I actually really apologise about that Glaswegian impression. I'm actually ashamed of myself. I did a really bad impression of a fucking Glaswegian man, and I am one. Oh, anyway. Right, Barry, come on, fuck, get back to this story. God's sake, man, hurry up. Right, so Edith had been released from prison. She'd served her time for assault. Free woman. She goes to meet her boyfriend. And so she finds David in a pub, and they have a reunion, but David isn't alone. David is 42 years old, and he's with his friend, Ian Mitchell. Now, Ian Mitchell is a landlord. He is 67 years old, and Ian and David, they live together in the same house. So the situation really is that this, Ian Mitchell, the 67-year-old, he has a property in the south side of Glasgow, and he rents out 2 rooms within that. He also lives within the property, but he rents out 2 rooms, and one of them is to David, Edith's boyfriend. So he knew Edith, right? He had been acquainted with Edith before. Edith affectionately called him Pops, a reference to the fact that he was a bit older, and she got on well with Pops. He was kind of known as like a man about town. You know, he was like 67. He used to drink in all the local pubs. People knew this guy, and they really liked him. He was a nice guy. He was a harmless, lovely guy. Edith sometimes would take advantage of the relationship and the fact that he was a nice man. And sometimes she would go to Pops, as we're going to know him in this story, for money. You know, just the odd bit of cash here or there. And the 67-year-old Pops, he would oblige. He'd give Edith the cash if he had it. I fucking hate people that like take advantage of older people. Just because they're getting their pension. Just because they're getting money from the government, you think it's okay to take... anyway, that's a whole other fucking thing, but... yeah. So, here they are. They're in the pub. And here Edith goes with the money thing. The pub closes, and Edith says to Pops and to her boyfriend David, let's get a taxi back to the flat. Let's go back to the flat and we'll keep on drinking and we'll have fun. So they agree, and she makes Pops pay for the taxi. And he obliges, he happily pays for it. So they go back to the flat. And it's party, party, party. It's party time. Now there's a third person in the flat. And that third person is Anthony Coyle. He also lives there. So remember I said that Ian Mitchell, Pops, was a landlord. So he rented a room to both David, Edith's boyfriend, and to another man, completely not connected, just almost a stranger, Anthony Coyle. So the setup was these three guys lived in this flat and they lived really happily. The three guys, yeah, they were fine. Pops was the landlord. He had 2 tenants. All was going well. So they're in the flat, they're in the living room, they're listening to music, they're having a few drinks, they're smoking some cigarettes, everything's going well, but not for long. A fight breaks out between Edith and her boyfriend David, and when the fight breaks out, it turns nasty very quickly. The pair of them are screaming at each other. Now, Pops, he's there right in the middle of this argument. He's in the living room with them. Anthony, the flatmate, he gets up and he goes to another room. He doesn't want to be involved in this argument. He's fine. He goes into his bedroom. When they're fighting, Edith loses her temper, and I mean loses her temper. What that argument was about between Edith and David will never be known. Never. And that's an indication that this story is not going to end well. Edith, in a rage, gets up from the living room and she leaves. She goes to the kitchen. In the kitchen, she finds the largest kitchen knife that she can find, and she walks back in to the living room. In a rage of catastrophic proportions, Edith takes the knife to where her boyfriend David sits on the couch and she stabs him twice. The first stab is into his right leg, his inside thigh. The second stab, his left leg, again, his inside thigh. The knife wounds enter his major arteries in both legs, and David starts to bleed profusely. He starts to bleed everywhere. Now, we're not talking about blood dripping slowly out. I'm talking major arteries have been hit and blood is spurting out everywhere. Blood is pouring out of his body all over the living room, and Edith is standing with the knife in her hand. David is screaming in pain, but he can't move. He cannot get up off of the sofa. Edith, she throws the knife to the floor. Now, Pops, the 67-year-old, he's just watched this whole exchange happen less than 2 meters from where he is sitting in his own living room. And the blood is coming out of David at such a rate that it's actually covering Pops and Edith. Pops is frozen in shock, in fear at this moment, and he doesn't know what to do. He just stays there. He just stays seated. He doesn't know what to do. Now, Anthony, the flatmate, the one that I told you had gone into his bedroom, he hears the screaming, he hears the shouting, and at that point he locks himself in his room. So just to clarify, we have David bleeding on the sofa. We have Pops in the living room in complete shock. Anthony has locked himself in his bedroom, and Edith is in a state of panic. So what does Edith do next? Does she call an ambulance for David as he lies there bleeding? No. Does she tell Pops to do something, do anything? Does she speak to him? No. Instead, she does this. I will be able to hear through the magic of sound your actual audible disbelief at this decision that Edith makes. She calls her 17-year-old son John, and she tells him that she needs him to come to this flat now. She needs his help. She tells him, get a taxi here now. So John is at this point out with his friend Jamie, who is also 17 years old. And so when he gets that phone call from his mum, he does what he's told. He gets in the taxi, as instructed by Edith, and he goes to the flat. And the friend Jamie comes with him. When they arrive at the flat, they walk in and they see blood all over the living room. The blood from David's body has spread through the room, and David is lying on the sofa close to death. Pops is still there in complete shock. So what does Edith do next? Why does Edith go by the name Mother of All Evil? Because Edith convinces her son and his friend that they must take out the witness. They have to get rid of Pops. Edith needs the old man gone. He's seen everything, and that is too risky. Too much of a risk. And so what happens next is brutal, it's bloody, and it's messy. It's one of the reasons this house gets called the House of Blood. John, 17, and his friend Jamie, they attack the 67-year-old Pops with a baseball bat blow to his head. When he's lying on his own living room floor, they stab him to death as Edith watches. The two boys then go and get an axe and they attack his dead body with an axe. So now the death count in the house is at 2. David is dead on the couch. He has bled to death. And Pops is lying in a pool of his own blood. And now this bit, right, this next bit, it's fucking just bizarre. I just don't get this. I don't get this. I don't understand what the thinking here is. I'll try and walk you through it. Maybe you get it. If you do, let me know, because I don't fucking get it at all. Edith goes to the kitchen and she boils a kettle. So she gets her kettle and she fills it. And once the water is at boiling temperature, she takes her son, his friend, and what they do is they go to the dead body of David. And Edith pours the kettle of boiling water over his head, just to make sure that he's dead. What the actual fuck? Now, she doesn't just do that once, she does it again. They refill the kettle. They boil the water once more, and this time they go to the dead body of Pops on the living room floor, and Edith once more pours boiling water over his face to make sure he's dead. It's at this point that Edith remembers something. There's someone else in the house. There's one more person in this flat, and this person is a potential witness. Anthony has locked himself in his room. So, Edith, she goes to his door. She begins to scream. She begins to bang her fists against the door and scream at him to come out. Anthony is behind the door and he is terrified. He's heard the entire ordeal and he knows that potentially he might be next. Edith, her son, and his friend, they are trying to force the door open, but it just will not open. Anthony is 71 years old and he's trying to barricade himself into his bedroom. He's piling whatever he can against the door to stop Edith and the two boys entering his room. In a moment of frustration, Edith instructs her son to go and get a screwdriver. And he does. John takes the screwdriver and he unscrews the bedroom door. 71-year-old Anthony waits inside the bedroom as his door is taken off of its hinges. Can you imagine? You fucking imagine what absolute terror that 71-year-old must have been feeling in that moment as his door is being unscrewed. When it's finally off of its hinges, Edith is screaming at her son and his friend to go and get him. They find golf clubs and they beat Anthony with golf clubs around his head until he falls down on the bedroom floor. But these blows to the head, they don't kill him. And so the 17-year-old friend, Jamie, he repeatedly stabs Anthony until he's dead. So let's assess the situation. 3 men are laying dead, brutally murdered in this flat. And Edith has to think, what's she going to do next? Right, so she comes up with a plan. You know, just because clearly Edith is the person that you would want in charge of a plan. She tells her son and his friend to get away from the scene. She says, go home. Go home and you were never here, right? You were never here. Just get out of the situation. Just go, get away now. But she doesn't leave. Edith is going to stay, and that's because she has a plan forming. When the 2 boys are gone and she's alone with the 3 dead bodies, Edith decides she's going to do some acting. She's going to do a bit of the acting. Okay? So here's what she does. She runs to a neighbour. She knocks the door really violently next door, and she says, "There's been a terrible event has happened at the flat. I've just arrived. I've got here and I've found 3 dead bodies. Please call the police. Please call the police." So the neighbour calls the police. Edith waits during that time, repeating her story to the neighbour. "Oh, I came into the flat tonight and there was 3 dead bodies and I don't know what to do and whatever." Right? So police arrive. And this is what police find when they arrive. They find Edith lying on the couch, clutching the dead body of David, the first victim, her boyfriend, the place where this all fucking started. And more acting here from Edith. She starts crying and she's hugging his body and she's telling police, "I just arrived and I found the flat like this and this is what it looked like," and she's screaming over and over and over, "Someone has killed my boyfriend. Someone has killed my boyfriend." Right, I'm sorry, Edith. As great an actress as you might think that you are, even Meryl fucking Streep wouldn't get away with that, right? Shut up. Stop it right now. So Edith is removed from the scene by police. I mean, firstly because she needs to be away from the scene, but also because police are immediately suspicious. They're not buying this. There's no fucking Oscar coming in Edith's direction. They're not buying this at all. Let's actually talk about the crime scene, because it's important in this story. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to tell this story. It's why it's called the House of Blood. Well, the police officer that I took the piss out of earlier, the one with the very Glaswegian voice, he said this: "In 33 years on the force, I have never seen this level of blood. It was dripping down the walls, the tables, the bookcase, the carpet, the sofa, all drenched in blood. There was blood in every room of the house. It trailed from one room to the next. It covered everything." He said, "The bodies of these 3 men were so badly damaged that I could not believe what I was seeing. One of the officers who had been called to the scene, he had to leave and be physically sick in the hallway. He just couldn't cope." Now, there are 2, and this is what I think is so fascinating. There's 2 really interesting things to note here about the scene. Firstly, the officers who had to enter into this, they were all given time off and access to therapy to be able to recover from just how horrific that scene was. It was that bad. And a piece of history was made here. And I like this. For the first time that it had ever happened, in the middle of the night, the police officer, the one that I was saying had the big strong Glaswegian accent, he, in the middle of the night, called the High Court in Scotland. And he spoke to a judge in the middle of the night and he asked, "Can I film this crime scene? Can I film this for future use?" Now, there was a bit of back and forth. The judge was not sure that was okay. Was that alright? Was it not? Okay, there's going to be photographs, there's going to be evidence, but actually what this police officer was talking about was going around with a camera and going, "Let's look at blood dripping down a wall. let's actually look at this dead body. Let's actually look at this. And the case that the police officer was trying to make is, I want this for future use. I want this for future training. He wanted it mainly, partly, for the court element of the case, but he also wanted it to train police officers so that they could be shown the House of Blood and be told, yes, this is one of the most horrific scenes Glasgow police have ever had to deal with. Side note, interesting fact, this video that he took that night was then sent to other countries for police to use in their training of new police officers. It went to Germany, it went to the USA, it went to Australia, and it went to China. I'm making a big deal about this video, right, for a very, very particular reason, and it's this. Police quickly worked out that Edith had a role in this murder scene, and within days, Edith cracked. She told the whole story. She admitted that she had brought her son and his friend into the flat and that they were responsible for these murders. So all three of them were arrested. But here's what's odd. All three of them pleaded not guilty. So, by this point, the press have dubbed it the House of Blood. This story is being told in pubs, in shops, on the streets, everywhere. So then the court case arrives, and Edith, and her son John, and his friend Jamie, they're all still saying not guilty. Now they're each tried individually, but in court, for all three of them, something makes them change their plea mid-court case. And what was that thing? It was the video that police took that night in the flat of the House of Blood. It gets used in court. It gets shown to the jurors. And it's seen for the first time by those three killers. And it's so graphic. It's so disturbing that there is no fucking way they will not be found guilty. Obviously, they can say not guilty, but there is DNA all over the place. And that alone, I mean, the DNA alone could convict them. That's fine. They know that. But it's actually the video being shown in court. The video that police officer was like, I'm going to wake up a judge at 3 a.m. and say, can I please film this because this is like nothing I've ever seen. It's that video that pushes them all in the right direction. And I don't want to boast, right? I don't want to be like but, you know, Scotland, it has invented a lot of things. Scotland, it's done a lot of things that the rest of the world have then caught up with later. I mean, I'm not talking about the kilt or shortbread, but, you know, I'm talking like the serious things. And actually, in all seriousness, I think in a B-Notes episode at some point, I will talk about Scottish law and the courts because, bizarrely, Scotland is a law unto its own. But actually, there are so many systems in the world, and there's actually, I've just found this from like doing lots of different bits of research. There's lots of things that happen in American courts that actually first happened in Scottish law, but Scottish law has moved on from it and it's never changed in other parts of the world, or Scotland was quite often the first to put down like a particular sort of protocol on things. Anyway, I'm not doing that. Oh, I'm Scottish man, Scottish is great. I'm not doing that bullshit because I would never do that. But anyway, just in future, I will talk about Scottish law because it does sit very oddly in the world of how things are tried and how things are worked out. Anyway, the three of them, they have their day in court. And the fallout is Jamie, the friend, is given 12 years in prison. John, the son, is given 12 years in prison. Now that's to do with the fact that they were both 17 at the time of the murders. And so they're given 12 years and then that's it. I don't think I agree with that, but we're getting into a contentious issue, getting into problems. Should they have served longer? I mean, the argument they're really for giving them that length of time is going, well, they were 17 and Edith basically made a phone call to her son and said, come here, I need you to help me, bring your pal, we're going to murder a couple of people. So, you know, that's why they're let out. That's after that length of time. That's why they got a short sentence. Edith is given, and this, I've just said, Scottish law does lots of amazing things, and this fucking baffles me. Edith gets this sentence: 13 years to life. Right, I don't understand that. 13 years to life. Now, if it was 30 years to life, I would have more peace with that, but no, it's 13 to life. The officers who attended that scene that evening were commended for their actions and for being able to work in those conditions. So John, Edith's son, he is now free. Jamie, the friend, he is now free. They are both in their early 30s. Edith has remained in prison to this day. Edith has not had an easy time of it. Apparently when she went into prison, she boasted. She boasted that she was the woman behind this massive headline murder. And the other prisoners did not take that too well. And they didn't take it well because innocent people died in that flat that night. Elderly people died. Defenceless people died because Edith could not control her temper. Edith has applied for parole many times and it's always been denied. The chances of Edith being out of prison are very, very slim. The property, the flat, well, it was cleaned, it was redecorated, and years later it was sold on to new occupants. But in Glasgow it will forever be known as the House of Blood. And so ends the story. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's quite the tale. It's quite a dark, dark tale. Yeah. I know one of my things that I often feel a lot of empathy for people and I do, and I'm a very empathetic person and I care a lot about people. I really care. You know, I sound like a wanker now. And sometimes when I look at these stories, I look at people and I go, oh, I know, but I think actually the reason you acted like that is actually just because you were in that circumstance and it wasn't really your fault and whatever. But I look at her son John, I look at his friend Jamie, and I go, those two boys, like, I know that they committed horrific murders in the flat that night, but they were 17 years old, and Edith was such a fucking controlling nightmare of a person that she led them down that road and she made them do it. But anyway, basically what I'm trying to get to is I can often empathise with people. Edith is someone I can't. I don't know what it is, right? But the more and more and more I try to think and see this story, because I do that all the time, try and see it from the perspective of the person. I know Edith had a really terrible life. I know she was, into drugs and into drink from she was like 15 years old, and she'd always had a really hard life, and there was prostitution, there was theft, there was in and out of court. But there's just something in the story where I'm like, I can't even find the littlest bit for me to go, I forgive Edith a little bit. I mean, I've got no fucking connection to the story whatsoever. I just don't know that I can, in myself, forgive Edith for that. Because it's easy to vilify people. It's easy to make monsters out of people, If you talk about your bigger ones, like I was talking at the beginning about your big headline cases. Oh, you've got your John Wayne Gacy's, you've got your Ted Bundys, you've got your Ed Geins. Is it Gaines? What's his name? I don't know what his name is. Anyway, you've got those people, and it's easy to kind of go, monster, that was just a monster, that was just a monster, and then you know their story, but you feel a bit connected. And with a lot of those people, maybe you can find connections, and maybe you can. I just can't with Edith. I just can't. Nah, it's not going to happen. Anyway, right, well, I don't really know what that little rant was about, but anyway, that's what that was. So, I slightly lost myself in my own thoughts there for a moment. So, if you're still listening, thank you. Okay, if you want to get in touch, you know you can. I'm all ears. I'm always listening. I'm always about. So, Facebook. Join the Facebook group. Twitter. I'm hanging about on Twitter. Instagram. Catch me on the Insta. I think the kids actually these days call it the gram. So, get me on the gram. What else? Oh, you can email me. So, until the next episode, I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening. Okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.